So, so generally speaking, I think the biggest thing that Ethereum gives you is something called adversarial thinking. So when you design a protocol, you need to assume that the protocol is always going to be attacked in some shape or form, right? And so you need always to, every time you write code and you work on something like Ethereum, you always need to keep track in your head about how can this be exploited? What if someone get access to these features in a malicious way, right? Everything needs to work in a vacuum, and it cannot be exploited in a vacuum. So that's, I think, the main thing that being a core developer teaches you. My name is Giulio Rebuffo. I am the CTO of Erigon, and I'm also the technical team lead of Erigon as of now. I usually do prototype of new features, and I usually just work on general optimization to the Ethereum protocol without changing the protocol itself. So imagine just optimizing on the current base without modifying it through hard forks like with Pierre does, or stuff like that.
What would you say has been your biggest contribution to the Ethereum protocol so far in your career?
Well, the Ethereum protocol, I think it was my role in the merge because I was the principal engineer on the Erigon side on the merge, essentially, when the merge happened. So that's probably by far the biggest impact I've ever had. I think anyone that worked at the merge can tell you the same thing, that the merge is probably the biggest impact. So I will pick the merge for that, definitely.
A lot of developers in the Meet the Dev series have said the exact same answer as you, so it does track. One thing, Giulio, that I want you to know that differs about this interview from other Meet the Dev series
Mhm.
is that you are the developer who inspired the entire Meet the Dev series. Do you know this?
No,
Yes.
glad to hear that, but I didn't know that.
In the Infinite Jungle podcast, which I used to host,
Mhm.
I never really asked developers about their background. I always asked them about a particular topic like Pectra or some kind of a technical topic. And your story was so interesting because you were, maybe still are, the youngest like Ethereum core developer. You started contributing to TurboGeth, which eventually became Erigon when you were still in high school. Like we talked in that episode about how you got into Ethereum protocol development, and that episode was so interesting that I was like, I need to do a whole spin-off series on the backgrounds of all these developers.
Damn. Okay, that's nice to hear. That makes me happy. I didn't know that, but thank you. That's wow, great.
So I want to catch up some of our listeners who maybe have not heard that episode because I do know part of your story and I want to dig into it a little bit more deeper in this episode. So in the Infinite Jungle interview that I had, you shared that you started contributing to TurboGeth, which eventually became Aragon when you were 17. You graduated high school, you helped out with the merge as principal engineer, and 5 years later, at 22, you became the CTO
Mhm.
of Aragon.
Yeah.
So you gave me all those details then. I want to drill into some of the highlights there. In that interview, you shared that when you were first started contributing to TurboGeth, you did so because you were interested in smart contracts, and you like saw this call out from Alexei Akunov, who's the founder of Aragon, about wanting to train out more core devs.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you even found out about smart contracts? Like, was it from a friend? How did you even hear about or get interested in Ethereum?
Well, the way I actually got interested at first was just a bit maybe cringe because when I was in high school, I was only 15 years old. There was like this craze. It was back in 2017, so it was like the one of the big bull run of crypto, and you know you used to hear stories about people making money left and right, and so like since I was like 15 years old, yeah, this kind of inspired me to look into cryptocurrency. And when I looked into it, I remember that I didn't like Bitcoin, for starters. I didn't like it. Yeah,
Why?
I didn't like Bitcoin. but I liked Ethereum a lot because of the smart contracts feature. I thought that Bitcoin at the time was kind of useless, if I have to be completely honest. And then I found Ethereum to be the more interesting project. So what I started doing is that I started doing open source contribution to something called Ride Network. Maybe some people remember it. It was the first big um, uh, payment channel project that ever came out. It was essentially probably the first time it was something like an L2 essentially. And it was, I think, really cool because it promised to scale Ethereum a lot. It never took off. It never took off. I think another person in Ethereum that worked with state channels and payment channels was Marius, but I don't really remember.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's basically the first project I contributed to. And it was good. And then I started digging deeper into it. I did some contribution to Kyber Network, which was a protocol, which was a protocol used for trading and DeFi, and which also failed later, but it is what it is. And then TurboGaf came. So it was a lot on and off work on open source project at the beginning. Sometimes it was a bit paid, but not a lot of stuff. And then I just kept, and then I just got in contact with Akunov after some time of doing this.
Gotcha. And your relationship with Alexei
Mhm.
Akronov, who's the founder of Aragon, you shared with me on the Infinite Jungle episode that he was kind of like your mentor. He
Yeah.
really helped you to grow into this role of being a core developer. Can you talk a little bit more about how he mentored you, and also if there were any other key mentors in your journey as a Ethereum core developer?
So I think so. So first of all, Alexei, yes, he was my first mentor, and he was probably the most important person in my crypto career by far. And the way he mentored me was actually initially just gave me very small projects to work on. The first thing I worked on Erigon was visualizing the data model. So essentially just creating an image with all of the database laid out in front of you so that you can visually compare it with Graph, and you could see what was done differently. And at the beginning, it was really just documentation work, just using the right primitives to pull out statistics. He made me build a GAF database to Erigon converter at some point, and he guided me through it. And it's and you know and yeah and so at the beginning it was just very little contribution. Then slowly I started getting a bit harder contributions, like
Mm.
an optimization to some indices. Then I started getting then I started working on some EVM optimizations. Then at some point I started working on some C++ components for our client, and then at some point later, what happened is that the merge started to become a thing, but people weren't taking really seriously at the time. Pretty much no one was, because the merge was always getting delayed. So, what happened is that I think he decided to just put me working on him for the time being. But what happened is that I basically, that was the only time when it actually happened, and I just ended up doing the entire work. Yeah, so that's essentially how it came out to be. So his mentorship was mostly just giving me work, reviewing my work, and then giving me feedback on how to improve. That was essentially the mentoring style. It was all remote, and we met each other like very few times a year. Yeah, it was all remote. He's not based in Switzerland. Um, so so yes, and other mentor aside, I didn't have anyone else. I think, at least technically, I
No
didn't.
one?
No one, yeah. No one, because no one, because I think that after the merge, I think something kind of changed in the team, because if you do something like that by yourself, then most of the code base at that point belongs to you, from in terms of contribution. Like if you're a software engineer, every engineer has their own piece of code base to work on, and their own expertise, and their own and their own points of confidence and strength within the code base. And at that point, I basically had a very good grasp of on how Erigon worked, and I think that it became so much so that I was essentially the second most knowledgeable person on the code base by the end of that. So
Yeah,
there was really no one to mentor me technically other than Alex at that point. It was not
I see.
possible, I think, at that point, aside from some
That's
niche parts.
That's a lot of responsibility for someone who is in their early 20s. And we talked about this also on the Infinite Jungle episode
Hmm.
about balancing work life and the
Yeah.
burnout that can happen. Since we last talked, I think it was in February 2025, and now we're recording this in August 2025. Any new learnings or kind of like thoughts you wanted to share on yeah, being able to steward this responsibility well
So
and yeah, make sure you're
yeah.
staying healthy, both like mentally, spiritually, physically.
So one good learning is that doing after I became the technical lead and CTO, I can confirm that you get burnout much more quickly. That's the first thing I found out, but it's very easy. But I think that if you just balance work and life, you actually manage to not get burnout. It's all about because I used to be. I like programming, and so at the end of the day, I became a workaholic at some point, I think, and if then you detach yourself from, and it just doesn't work in when you actually do management. It doesn't work in management. It destroys you. So you need to have a work-life balance, and you need to be patient. So that's it essentially. Learning to be
Can you
patient.
Can you describe what an average day looks like for you as the CTO of Aragon, like from your morning to your work to how you kind of like unwind?
So, well, my day my day usually starts when I don't know how to structure this, but I guess that the first thing I do during my workday is just to check my emails and check messages and see if there is anything I need to do. Then usually I always keep a technical project for myself because I need because I right now I basically invent new features or I come up with the new priorities. So I always keep track of some personal prototypes. So usually I check on those. For example, I have usually machines running new code to see if the sync goes well or some end or some new feature is going as planned. So I do some monitoring, some checkups. Then we have team meetings, different team meetings for different team members. I have to attend, I guess, most of them. So that's around 3 hours a day worth of team meetings. Not everyone in Erigon does 3 hours a day meetings. Only me. Okay, just to clarify, we're not insane. Other people don't do that, thankfully. And yeah, so usually the day is usually like that. Then I do, of course, some coding, but it became less of a thing in recent times. If you look at my GitHub, it started getting a little bit dwindly because I have other responsibilities to attend to. And yeah, this is pretty much my day. The way I usually unwind, and I do all of these things in not a really in not a specific order. I just it depends on if there is a conflict, it's usually the conflict takes priority, and if there is nothing, I usually just check on the check on the machine, or maybe I do some coding work. Um, yeah, but no, they don't happen in a specific order. And the way I usually unwind is I close my computer. That's it. There is no other way you unwind because if you unwind, because if you try to, because I could stay until 3 a.m. coding after work, but that's not healthy. So I don't do that anymore. I stopped.
What else do you do if you're not coding and on your
Well,
computer?
if I'm on my computer and I'm not coding, am I working? Is this the work setting or?
No, no, no. Like as in you've closed your computer. What do you do?
Oh, it really depends. Maybe I go buying dinner or buying groceries for the next days. Or I just decide to watch some Netflix show or videos on YouTube or play video games. I'm now playing this new game called Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Uh, yeah. So I do that. I just relax. So I buy stuff. I eat. I watch videos on YouTube.
Like a normal human being.
like a normal human being.
Like
Like
a
a
normal
normal.
human being.
And yes, and
Okay.
sometimes they stare at the price of ETH because it's a good thing lately. But that's it.
Well, now it is. For the
Now it is.
earlier half of this
Before I
year,
wasn't doing that. Now, blah.
it
We
was
don't
a
watch
little
that.
concerning.
We don't watch.
Um, about your technical skills.
Hmm.
When you were first starting, you obviously brought some technical skills with you as a programmer. You knew a certain amount of coding. Can you describe what you were strong at as in terms of technical skills and what you have learned? What technical skills you've learned as you've been in Ethereum, as you've like stayed in this role?
So, so generally speaking, I think the biggest thing that Ethereum gives you is something called adversarial thinking. So when you design a protocol, you need to assume that the protocol is always going to be attacked in some shape or form, right? And so you need always to, every time you write code and you work on something like Ethereum, you always need to keep track in your head about how can this be exploited? What if someone get access to these features in a malicious way, right? Everything needs to work in a vacuum, and it does, and it cannot be exploited in a vacuum. So that's, I think, the main thing that being a core developer teaches you. That's the main thing. Then the other thing that it teaches you, in my case, it was just basic intuition about how computer and code is supposed to work. So when you look at code, I grew the habit to understand whether that code will run faster or not. This is a skill I developed with time. So if you give me some code, I can just tell you if it's gonna be fast or slow, or it's gonna be a bottleneck or not. And usually I'm right. Usually. So that's actually a very useful skill because it makes you write very good code on the first try. And in the beginning, I wasn't capable of doing that. There is like actually an unpopular opinion about programming languages, and it is that I don't think they matter at all, like at all. I think that programming languages can be learned very easily. I think almost everyone can learn them. But you need logic and to apply them, and I think that that's the most important part. Many people give like importance to programming language. For example, with client diversity language, you need to write them in different languages, but that doesn't really matter. The language isn't the problem. It's mostly the person that writes it and the logic behind it, right?
Mm.
Different in implementations that makes stuff like diversity important, for example, not programming languages. So yeah.
That's a good point that the client diversity is not just a diversity of programming language, it's a diversity of implementation for nodes.
Yes. Yes. If the same person writes code in two different languages, it's the same implementation. They're not gonna do anything different because it's the same person. You will see if I write something, you can discern, you can tell that it's me just because of how the code is written and the rationale behind it if you know me. Um, so that's not a good thing, unless the programming language has a vulnerability, but that's very rare. It almost never happened.
Are there any technical skills that you think that you're working on right now to improve and trying to utilize a lot more in your day to day as a core developer?
So right now, I actually cannot really tell because I guess that you only understand that in insight. When I was learning any of these skills, I don't mean I didn't know I was learning them. It happened. It just you look back on it and you're like, okay, this is how I'm different. Now I can't really tell that. What I'm sure I'm learning is how to talk to people. That's that's more stuff I'm learning. I just learn how to structure things so that they don't hurt the team and how to not create conflicts, which happens from time to time. And you need to basically just shut. I know use proper language with the team and not create conflict. That's essentially what I'm learning mostly, or how to stop conflict from happening. I don't create a lot of conflict in the team myself. That almost never happens. Oh, thankfully. But
That's a really good skill. That's like
yeah,
important skills to be learning,
the
especially
soft
as
skill.
you're, yeah, doing more management work. Um, I appreciate the insight into some of the more technical parts of the role of being an Ethereum core developer. I want to ask you some questions in the second half of this interview about Ethereum core development process at large for people that are interested in the way that Ethereum develops and also interested in getting involved themselves. Generally, what are your thoughts on the Ethereum development process? Do you think that it's a sustainable process the way that it works right now?
This is yeah. I guess I guess that the process right now just works. It can work even in the long term. I so there are, lately people tried to kind of change it. My opinion is that the new changes don't really gonna change much about the process. Unfortunately, I don't think it's gonna change the outcome. So my main two things that I'm gonna just say if I really need to critique it is that people tend to put their focus on when there is a new feature coming up, many people put their focus on development speed, but I worked in Ethereum for a long time, and I think there is also a very strong problem with how the governance how people make the governance decisions. One example is that well, it's still the case that if everyone wants a feature and someone just champions against it, it's likely that the feature just doesn't happen, even if it's very important for everyone. Or stuff, or yeah, or just generally stuff like this, and that's kind of a shame. I think it should be more better structured. But that's the only input I can give. I think that overall we are still mostly bottlenecked by speed of development, and yeah, I cannot really do much against that. It's just the way things are.
Anything that you think will improve things that would change the way things are that you think would be important to for developers to consider or implement?
Mm, I am not sure. I guess I guess we're in a better spot now because we have more testing, but you know, so that made things better. I don't know how. It depends how you want things to be better. If you want people to be more secure, yes, I think more testing is good. Possibly on the networking part, because I think that there isn't a lot of effort put there right now. And But aside from that, I don't really know, because at the end of the day, if you want speed, for example, you will need to get faster horses, and that's that doesn't really work. And yeah, we're just going as fast as we can right now. And as you can see, for example, the Fusaka is getting slightly delayed right now, and it's proof of that. Like, you can't speed things up with the better process. The only thing you can speed up is the decision taking, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Ethereum protocol, the Ethereum code base is the same no matter what governance processes are
Yeah.
changing around it. And so if you want to
The people are
upgrade,
also the same. The people are also the same. So you can fire people, you can fire everyone and then replace them. But that's like, I mean, if you really want to speed things up, that you can try doing that. Please
but
don't
you
do it.
can't kick people out in that like it's an
Yeah, yeah,
open source like protocol that anyone can contribute to, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
exactly. There are
I mean,
sacrifices to be made. I'm joking. Of course, I don't think this, but but
who's the first person you would cut, Giulio? Who's the
no, no,
first
no, no. I
person?
can say no. I can
I'm
do
just
this.
joking,
I'm gonna cut
but
myself out. I'm gonna leave one day.
but that would be funny.
Mm,
Okay, but in the protocol development process,
mhm.
are there any underserved areas of protocol development that you wish more people would start contributing to? Um, there's yeah, I mean, we talked about a little bit about client diversity. And for a time, a lot of people believe there should be more people creating new clients. What is kind of an important area of protocol development that you wish more people would start contributing and getting their eyes?
Probably, probably, the first one will be networking. The second one will be RPC. Um, so I think I think they're very close to each other. I think networking takes the top spot because a lot of people, uh, I think, don't really look into it, and they treat it as a black box, and that creates problems with specification, with the IPs authoring. So if someone proposes a change and they don't understand how it's going to affect networking, it's going to waste everyone's time. And since a lot of people don't, and because the majority of core developers actually, I don't think they really look into networking. I think each core development team have, their own networking team. They don't, there is a little bit of friction. It creates a little bit of friction, and I think it's very, 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 very vital part of the protocol. And if you don't have people that are reviewing the IPs directly understand that, it's gonna be problematic. It's gonna create issues, in my opinion. So I think it's networking. It takes the top spot because of that. Um, the second one will be RPCs. RPCs is just that people don't care about RPCs. We care about RPCs, but we're the only one. That's it.
Wait, why do you say that no one else cares about RPC?
Because it's changing now, but it wasn't actually factored into L1 scaling for starters, and RPCs have been in a pretty they need features that the clients don't currently have. I'm developing those features actually uh, because I saw the opportunity to develop them, and I'm rolling some of them out. For example, the if get proof it takes basically 20 or 30 terabytes for a PC to run historically, and I was able to put it down to 5 terabytes recently. And yeah, and it happened after like many years. And I think and I think there are a lot of improvements here this year. And RPC, and also another important thing about RPC is that you can reduce the slot time as much as you want. But if your RPC, your MetaMask wallet, is gonna answer you with 2 seconds delay because you don't care about the JSON RPC, then you're gonna see a transaction late anyways. You can decrease it to 200 milliseconds, they're gonna work. And yeah, and actually I work with some L2s and and some alt L1s, and that's actually the case most of the time, that their PC doesn't is actually the bottleneck at some point when you decrease the slot time.
This
You
is
don't have 200 milliseconds slot time. That doesn't exist anywhere.
it's important to address those bottlenecks. And it's interesting that you say that because on prior episodes, Justin Florentine from the Bezu team talked about the RPC working group as an important initiative.
Yeah, so I think that's more kind of a specification group. It's not really an optimization group as far as I understand it.
I
uh,
see.
you need yeah, in my opinion, RPC need more care from anyone, and not only from us. But
Mm.
that's it, essentially.
No, that's a good call out. And Marius and the a prior episode in the series also shared that networking was a really big part of where he'd like to see more contributions. So yeah, I think when both of you guys had mentioned networking, it made me think of how pivotal networking is to code changes like PeerDAS to scaling blobs.
Yeah.
And I feel like more contributions on that would even help. Yeah, developers be able to achieve initiatives like scaling Ethereum more.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I I agree. Generally, that's the case. Generally, I think some part of the delay of Pirdas was actually partially because of that. Partially.
So we talked a little bit about how what areas of contributions are really important for the Ethereum protocol and like different pain points in the protocol development process. For people that are interested in actually contributing to Aragon specifically,
Hmm.
how would you recommend that they start to contribute to Aragon? Are there areas in which you think are more underserved that you're actively looking for more people to jump in on? Tell me about how anyone listening could start where they should start in terms of getting involved with Aragon.
So, if I wanted to get involved with Erigon today, and I add my knowledge of the code base for whatever reason, I'd say I would probably looking into the JSON RPC, because for a bunch of main reasons. First of all, it's not really critical code, right? If there is a bug there, the world is not gonna end. And secondly, it's because it's easy to review. So if you're a new contributor, you are not gonna, like in any code base, you are going to get your review, but you're not gonna get it like instantly, right? It's gonna take like 1 or 2 days before you get your review. So you need to work on something that it's not critical so that we can trust it because it comes from someone outside of it, but that and you can review easily, and and then you can, and then you can scale it up. You can go from RPC, then you can work maybe on some optimizations on the core Ethereum part of things, on the EVM. Maybe you fix, maybe you profile the code base and you do some very low hanging fruit and you find it for us and you fix it. That's how I probably would go. And then eventually, I'd say that if you're good, we could probably hire you. That's actually something we did in the past. And if you, and that's also how many people got in Ethereum in the first place, just by contributing to code bases. So
Yeah.
that's what I would do. I would say start with your PC probably.
Okay, that's good advice for anyone that's listening and interested in getting involved into the Aragon project.
Mhm.
For this section of the interview, I want to do some rapid fire questions with you, Giulio. These are really quick. Just say the
Mhm.
first thing that pops into your head, okay?
Okay, I'll try.
And keep the answers snippy, you know,
Okay.
like
Yeah,
a
okay.
ping pong ball.
Okay. Okay, let's
um,
go.
okay, first question. What do you like most about Ethereum protocol development?
Probably the community. Probably, I'd say.
And second question, conversely, what do you dislike the most about what you do?
That's actually a very hard question. Um, I guess I would. I cannot answer this quickly. It's not
No,
possible.
it's okay. Take your time.
It's it's not possible. Okay, so let me just think about this. What do I
Is it
don't?
because you really like what you do? Or
I
is it
really,
because
I really do like what I do, and I really do like what I do. But generally about working on Ethereum, I guess sometimes I don't agree with some ACD decisions. Mostly it's when I proposed a bunch of APs for Fusak, and I think the thing I hated the most was really convincing people. Not because I don't like other people's opinion, but because it's your job, and talking to other people is just not something I like to do. Right, that's
I
it.
see.
It's
Like
not
kind
thing. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
like kind of lobbying for trying to convince people, like debating, kind of like what you saw the
I
Prism team doing with EPBS, like really like going on all these
I
shows and like talking to
I don't
stakeholders.
do lobby. I don't. I don't really do any of that. I usually just talk to developers and ask their opinion, and usually I manage to be quite convincing. Some people know, but you just need. I can take a no for an answer usually. I learned how to do that. So now I know how to navigate myself with the APs now. Just talk to people, just talk to different teams, and if you come have convincing arguments, you just you get your APs into Ethereum. I have 4 APs into Fusaka, so I guess uh, I guess I know how to do that. Uh, yeah,
Okay. But you would say that's like probably the part of your role that maybe
yeah,
is
it's
not the most fun.
stressful. It's really stressful. It's really stressful because you don't control any of that, and I think it's not in the human nature to not have things in their control. So you kind of just you're shakes. You need, you know.
Okay, back to the rapid fire questions. What is something that you wish somebody had told you about jumping into Ethereum protocol development that you wish that you knew before you got into it?
Oh, so I think this actually generally, you should. You should be more patient. That's what I would tell to my younger self. But unfortunately, this is something a bit impossible for me because I was 17 at the time. So, I used to crash out a lot. I used to be very mature and stupid. Now I'm not anymore. But unfortunately, it's very hard for me. I learned from my mistakes there. I learned from my mistakes there from my past immaturity. Now I'm a more calm and collecting an individual. At the time, I used sometimes to get into dramas that were stupid.
What is something about the way that Ethereum develops that you don't think many people know about?
It's actually it's pretty open. I don't know how to answer that. I actually
Okay,
don't know. I actually just don't
that's
know.
fair. Let's skip that one
No
because
problem.
that's totally fair. Do you think is the most necessary character trait to be an Ethereum protocol developer?
I think, well, I think the biggest character trait is general critical thinking. Mostly, you need to. I guess you need to. First of all, you need to be able to have what I called before adversarial thinking. You need to have that, and and also you need good logical skills to solve problems as an Ethereum core developer. Then generally, I guess if you want to be uh, more successful and try to then step it up a notch, I guess you need to be just confident and believe in yourself, I guess. That's what I'm gonna say there.
Yeah, yeah. I know people think that some of these things are very cliche, but I think it's worth saying. It's worth
Most people don't believe in themselves. Most people are
yeah,
scared to talk to other people. That's actually not cliche at all. People say that, but they don't actually follow through with it.
right,
They ask
right.
you for permission, so I guess you don't ask for permission. You ask only for forgiveness. Oh, that sounds okay. Whatever. Yeah.
Last rapid fire question. If you weren't working on Ethereum, is there another open source project that you would want to work on? If so, what is it?
If there was no Ethereum, I would probably look into working for something like Quadrant, which is a vector database implementation that is open source. Yeah, I used to work. I used to play with vector database in the past few months for fun. If anything, it's very interesting technology, very interesting data structures, in my opinion. For people who don't know, vector database is used in artificial intelligence to query information like a search result, right? So you put in your question and it gets matched to a document based on a human like question. And the technology is actually very elegant and it's not that hard, believe it or not. It's actually very understandable. You can probably understand that with the simple linear algebra, like class 101. It's very stupid, but yeah, that's very interesting stuff in my opinion.
Hmm, fascinating. All right. Well, thank you so much, Giulio. I feel like I know more of your story now that we did this part two of in the Meet the Dev series.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. That seems, yeah, that's good. Now you know more about me. Wow.
Well, yeah, me and and everyone else too. Like they can have learnings from your
Yeah,
story.
you have more friends now. That's great. You know more about your friends.
Anything else though you wanted to share in this interview about your journey as an Ethereum developer that I didn't ask you about, but that you wanted to share?
I think you went over all the important stuff. I cannot really think of anything right now.
Okay, cool. Well, then I'm gonna stop the recording, okay? Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Devs. I'm Christine D. Kim, the host of this series. Meet the Devs is a mini-series of the ACD Toolkit, which you can learn more about on my Substack, christinedkim.substack.com. All the information shared in today's episode and this series is strictly for informational purposes. Nothing communicated constitutes investment advice, an offer, recommendation, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The interview that you just heard was recorded on August 27, 2025. You can find out more information about Giulio, the Erigon client, and Erigon the company in the show notes of this episode. Special thanks to Shanae Kim for the illustrations for this series. And thank you all again for tuning in to another episode of Meet the Devs. I'll be back with a new episode soon. Talk to you guys then.